Welcome to Upstairs Studios, and this is the first installment of Music You Can Use. I'm your host, John Whitings, and I am happy to have you along. In this lesson, we're going to cover the basics of how music works. Don't be fooled for a minute. There is nothing simple about music. I've heard it said that the best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time, and that's exactly how we're going to approach music. I'd like to start with a short explanation of what sets music apart from the other noises or sounds that we hear. The truth is that any sound can become music. All it needs is to be organized. For example, let's take the sound of me slapping the desk that I'm sitting at. If I ask you what you hear, you'd say, well, John, it sounds like you're smacking the desk. And I am smacking the desk. But watch this. All of a sudden, the noise of me slapping the desk becomes very musical. What's the difference? I organized the sound with the concept of time. One of the ways that we organize sound is by time. The other way we organize sound is connected to the concept of pitch. Let's start with just a simple definition. Pitch is the highness or lowness of sound. The way we change pitch is to change how fast or how slow a sound vibrates, which takes us to a discussion of how sound works. The easiest way to understand sound is to think about water. Sound and water work very much alike, with the exception of density. Water is much more dense than sound, and it moves a lot slower. Have you ever thrown a rock into the water and watched the waves move away from the point of impact? There is a lot about sound that we can learn from looking at that wave. The first thing we observe is the waves that move away from the point of impact of the rock. Those waves are formed by building up and releasing of pressure. This building up and releasing is called oscillation. The speed that this repeating cycle happens is called frequency. We measure frequency in hertz. As humans, we can hear from 20 oscillations or hertz per second all the way up to 20,000 vibrations per second. Anything below 20 hertz is called subsonic, and anything above 20,000 is called supersonic. Now, there's not much use for the subsonic frequencies, but the supersonic frequencies is where our radios, our AM and FM bands, and cell phones are working. Making a fairly long story short, the faster something oscillates, the higher the pitch will be. The slower it oscillates, the lower the pitch will be. Not going much deeper than that, but in our Western system, we have this phenomenon called an octave. The way it works is we take one pitch vibrating at 220 cycles per second, we'll say. And then we double that frequency to 440 vibrations per second, which, by the way, is our standard of tuning. Have you ever went into a group of musicians and heard somebody ask, hey, are we tuning to A equals 440 or are we tuning to 440? That's what they're talking about. The A, which is located right below middle C, is vibrating at 440 cycles per second, or 440 hertz per second. By changing the reference pitch, you can raise or lower how high something is performed. Just this morning in church, we had special music and we played the Back to God by Reba McEntire. And as I was working out the chords to that particular song, I noticed that the song was recorded in the key of G flat. Listening to the song, I also noticed the way the guitars were sounding, that the voicings that they were using was as if they had recorded the song playing in the key of G. They simply tuned the guitars down a half step, which got them into G flat. Back to the idea of the octave. We then take the octave and we divide it into 12 equal steps. We call those half steps. And we play from the bottom of the octave to the top, and it creates a thing that we refer to as a chromatic scale. That's how the pitch system works in our Western culture. I say that because our system, which was brought to us mostly by the Greeks, is not the same for all cultures. If you listen to Eastern music and some music from, say, the Arabic countries, their music sounds much different because of the way they handle pitch. Anyway, to recap, we organize sound two ways. We organize sound by time or by pitch. Any sound not organized in those ways, we generally consider to be noise and not music. Okay? So let's get back to the elephant. In music, the elephant has three main bites or elements. Those elements are melody, harmony, and rhythm. I want to take a quick look at each. That way we have a solid foundation to build on. The first element is the melody. The melody is considered to be the most important element because it determines the song or the tune that we're hearing. There are exceptions to this. I mean, who doesn't know what's coming whenever we hear boom, boom, tsh, boom, boom, tsh, or when you hear psst, tat, doom, doom, tat, tss, tat, doom, doom, tat. But those two songs, We Will Rock You by Queen and Walk This Way by Aerosmith, are exceptions. They're not the rules. The rules for writing melodies are different depending on the style of the song that we are working with. Rock, rap, country, jazz, classical, they all handle the melody in different ways. The thing that they have in common is that all melodies happen one pitch or one sound at a time. If they ever play more than one of those pitches at a time, one of the pitches becomes harmony, and we'll talk about that later. One other discussion we might as well go ahead and have is, where do these pitches come from? If I knew nothing about the piano and I walked up to it and you told me to write a melody or you'd shoot me, I guess I would just have to be dead, because all of those black and white keys staring at me would terrify me. Well, I've got some good news. It's not quite as complicated as you might think. In our Western culture, we have two systems that we use for most of our popular styles. Those two systems are the major system and the minor systems. I bet you've probably heard of them. This is not the lesson for us to figure out these systems, but let's just trust that in our culture, all melodies are built either on the major scale or the minor scale. Let's have a bit of fun here. The next time you get around a piano, I want you to find where middle C is. Simply locate two of the black notes grouped together anywhere on the keyboard and go to the left. They're all over the keyboard, but the one to the left of the two black keys is C. Now, using this key C, I know we've not talked about keys yet, but I will explain that later, I promise, which has no black keys, only white ones. Play a C, and then play any other white note that you want to. But when you end, come back to C. What you will find is that if you play by the rules of the major or by the minor system, things sound all right. We've been conditioned to accept this sound as good. Let me show you. I'm just being random, but here's a C. Okay, maybe you weren't dancing around, but it's an okay melody. It didn't sound bad. All right. To recap, melody is the most important element. It identifies what we're listening to. It happens one note at a time, and it uses pitches from either the major system or the minor system for note selection. All right? The next bite. Let's talk about harmony. When two or more notes are played together, we have harmony. In our culture, usually the top note of the two is considered the melody and the ones below it are considered harmony. I like to think of harmony as the supporting pitches to the melody. Most harmony is made up of a minimum of 3 pitches, though it can have more, depending on how complex or how colorful you want the chord to be. Here's a simple C chord. Here's a C9. It's still a C chord with a little color. Anyway, chords are Trapezan structures, which mean they are built on thirds. I'm skipping a lot here, but if you'll trust me, a C major scale starts on C and it uses no sharps or flats, and it ends on C an octave above. Simply C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. If you think of C as 1, and D is 2, and E is 3, and F is 4, and G is 5, and A is 6, and B is 7, you go back and play the first, and the third, and the fifth, and you have built a chord. In this case, the 1 is C, the third is E, the fifth is G, C, E, G, and that is actually a C major chord. There are 4 basic types of chords in our Western culture. The major chord, the minor chord, a little darker, diminished chord, darker still, and then the augmented chord. All 4 of those are C chords. They start on C. Later in another lesson, I'll cover chord construction, how these chords are made. I hope you stick around for that because that's where things really get to be fun. Our final bite for this lesson is rhythm. I would like for you to associate the word or concept of rhythm with the time. What happens between now and then? Sometimes in music, we divide time into equal units. When time is divided into units, we call them beats. Beats can be thought of in 2 categories, strong or weak. A strong beat is felt when time is divided evenly. These hand claps are fairly equally divided. They are creating a strong beat. When the beat is strong, it allows us to anticipate when the next beat is going to occur. Drummers and dancers are particularly sensitive to this, or at least they should be. Other times, we do not. Once I begin to vary the clapping or beat pattern, it becomes impossible to tell when the next beat is going to happen. Again, here's strong. And you just don't know when the next one's going to happen. If you've ever watched a director or a conductor in front of a group, you may have wondered what in the world they are doing. I've watched several times myself and wondered the same thing. But one of their primary responsibilities is to show the ensemble exactly where the beat falls. That way the group can stay together. It is especially important when the music begins to slow down or speed up that everybody stays together. Happens a lot of times at the beginning or sometimes at the end of a song. Now, I'd like to tell you that that's all there is, but I need to clarify one more point while we're here, and that's the concept of meter. Simply put, meter is the grouping of beats. We're going to listen to my trusty smartphone as I give you a series of beats at 75 beats per minute. Listen to my trusty smartphone as I have a steady beat played at 75 beats per minute. That is technically how we measure beats, by the minute. Tempo is the word we use to describe how fast or how slow the beats are passing. A song with a fast tempo means the beat is passing quickly. A song with a slow tempo means the beat is moving slowly. I'm going to try that one more time. Listen to my trusty smartphone as I have a steady beat played at 75 beats per minute. That's technically how we measure beats, by the minute. Tempo is the word we use to describe how fast or slow the beats are passing. A song with a fast tempo means the beat is passing quickly. A song with a slow tempo means the beat is moving slowly. Anyway, something very interesting happens whenever we take a beat pattern and we start breaking it into groups. All of a sudden, there begins to have a feel to it. Listen, I'm going to start with taking it into two groups, or two beats in a group. Or three. Or the most popular group in our culture is four. Notice that on all of these, I never changed the tempo, just the grouping or the meter. It definitely changes how we feel the music. So there you go. The end of Lesson 1, the musical elements, melody, harmony, and rhythm. I hope you've enjoyed Lesson 1 of Music You Can Use. I'm your host, John Winings, and I hope to see you next time. Until then, keep on jamming. Bye.